AITA for refusing a gift from a coworker. Because I thought it was a passive-aggressive insult? Wait, you're giving me soap? I couldn't believe it. My coworker Dan handed me a fancy-looking box wrapped in gold paper with a big smile on his face. But as soon as I opened it, my stomach dropped. Inside was an entire hygiene kit. Deodorant, shampoo, body wash, a loofah, even a little bottle of cologne. It wasn't even subtle. At first I laughed, thinking it had to be some kind of joke. But then he said, "I thought you might need this." My laughter stopped. I asked, "What's that supposed to mean?" Dan just shrugged and said, "It's just a gift. Thought it'd be useful." Useful? Useful for what? Before I go any further, let me explain. I, 27 men, consider myself a pretty laid-back, eco-conscious guy. I believe we overdo it with hygiene in this society. Constantly showering, scrubbing, spraying ourselves with chemicals. It's bad for the environment and probably bad for us too. I only shower when I really need to, like if I'm visibly dirty or had a super sweaty day. On average, that's maybe twice a month. And before anyone jumps to conclusions, no, I don't smell bad. I've asked people before and they've always said I'm fine. Well, okay, not always. Sometimes people will wrinkle their noses or step back a little, but I figure everyone has off days. I also don't use toothpaste when I brush my teeth. It's just a marketing gimmick. Water and a good scrub with the toothbrush do the trick, and it's better for the planet. Deodorant? Forget it. That stuff clogs your pores and causes cancer. And besides, sweat is natural. Why are we so obsessed with covering it up? Anyway, back to the gift. Dan handing me this hygiene kit felt like a slap in the face. Who does that? Who just casually gives someone soap and deodorant like it's a normal thing? It was insulting. He didn't even try to disguise it as something else, like a holiday gift or a secret Santa. It was just, "Here, you need this." I told him I couldn't accept it, and he looked surprised, like I was the one being rude. "I'm just trying to help," he said. "It's not a big deal." Not a big deal? He basically told me I stink in front of half the office. After Dan walked away, I sat at my desk fuming. I kept replaying the moment over and over in my head. The way he smiled when he handed me the box, the condescending tone when he said, "I thought you might need this." What did he mean by that? Did he really think I'm dirty? That I smell? Honestly, it's not the first time people have been weird about my lifestyle. Last month, during a meeting, Beth kept coughing and looking in my direction. At one point, she actually cracked the window, even though it was freezing outside. I thought it was just allergies, but now I'm wondering if it was something else. And there was this one time a few weeks ago when I caught someone spraying air freshener near my desk. They claimed it was because the office gets stuffy, but now I'm starting to connect the dots. Here's the thing. I don't see why everyone is so obsessed with smelling like flowers or ocean breeze or whatever artificial scents they're into. Sweat is natural. It's part of being human. And before anyone accuses me of being lazy or gross, I want to make it clear. I'm not. I wash my hands religiously, with just water, of course, because soap is full of unnecessary chemicals. I also rinse my clothes regularly in cold water to keep them fresh. That's enough. When I told my roommate about what happened with Dan, he just stared at me. After a long pause, he said, "Well, maybe he was just being thoughtful." Thoughtful? I don't think so. Dan isn't exactly subtle. He's the kind of guy who loves to give advice no one asked for. He's always going on about productivity hacks, or how we should all switch to standing desks. A few months ago, he told Lisa she should try smiling more during presentations. Lisa didn't speak to him for a week. I decided I wasn't going to let this slide. The next day, I confronted him in the break room. "Hey, about that gift," I said, keeping my voice calm. "I don't know what you were trying to say, but it came off as really rude." Dan looked genuinely confused. "Rude? I wasn't trying to be rude," he said. "I just thought you'd appreciate it. It's a nice set." "A nice set?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "Dan, you gave me soap and deodorant. That's not a gift." "That's an insult," he laughed nervously. "It's not an insult. It's just something useful. Everyone could use a little self-care." Self-care? I couldn't believe this guy. "I don't need soap and deodorant to take care of myself," I shot back. "I'm fine the way I am." At that point, a few other coworkers started to gather around, clearly interested in the drama. I could see Jenny trying to hide a smile, and Mike pretending to check the coffee machine while obviously eavesdropping. "Look," Dan said, holding up his hands defensively. "I didn't mean to offend you. I just thought it might help, with everything." "With what, Dan?" I pressed. "Go ahead, say it. You think I smell?" Dan hesitated, glancing around the room. The silence was deafening. Finally, he said, "Well, yeah. Sometimes. It's not just me either. A lot of people have noticed." My jaw dropped. "A lot of people?" I repeated, my voice rising. "Who, Dan? Name one person." At that moment, Jenny burst out laughing. She quickly covered her mouth, but the damage was done. Mike snorted into his coffee. Even Beth, who usually keeps to herself, looked like she was holding back a grin. Dan sighed. "I'm not trying to embarrass you," he said quietly. "I just thought this would be a nice way to help without making a big deal out of it. Clearly, I miscalculated." Miscalculated? That was the understatement of the century. I felt humiliated, but I wasn't about to back down. "For your information, I shower when I need to," I said, glaring at Dan. "Not everyone needs to bathe every day. It's bad for your skin, and it's a waste of water." The room went silent again. I could see Dan trying to process what I'd just said, but before he could respond, Beth chimed in. "Wait, how often do you shower?" she asked, her tone somewhere between curiosity and horror. "Twice a month, usually," I said matter-of-factly. Beth's eyes widened. "Twice a month?" she repeated, clearly struggling to keep her composure. "Are you serious?" Of course I'm serious, I said, crossing my arms. Bathing too often strips your skin of natural oils. It's unnecessary and wasteful. The room erupted into awkward laughter. Beth looked like she didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Mike walked out, shaking his head. And Dan? He just stood there, staring at me like I was some kind of alien. Dan's reaction was priceless. He opened his mouth like he was about to say something, then closed it again. Finally, he muttered, I guess that's one way to live. One smart way to live, I corrected, leaning back against the counter. Do you have any idea how much water the average person wastes by showering every day? Or how many harmful chemicals are in your fancy soaps and shampoos? It's bad for the planet, and it's bad for your health. We've all been brainwashed by the hygiene industry. At this point, the room was divided. Beth looked like she was trying not to throw up. Jenny couldn't stop laughing. And Mike, who had returned with a fresh cup of coffee, just stared at me with wide eyes. Okay, but... Beth started, clearly trying to choose her words carefully. What about... smell? What about it? I asked, genuinely confused. You don't think you smell? She asked, her voice going up an octave. At all? No, I said firmly. I've asked people before, and no one has ever told me I smell bad. Jenny coughed, and it sounded suspiciously like she was covering up a laugh. Have you ever considered that people might just be too polite to tell you? She asked, a little too sweetly. No, I said again. I'd know if I smelled. Trust me. At that moment, Dan sighed and ran a hand through his hair. Look, he said. I didn't give you the kit to be mean. I gave it to you because people in the office have been commenting. Commenting? I asked sharply. Like who? Dan hesitated, clearly regretting his life choices. I'm not naming names, he said carefully, but people have noticed. And it's not just the shower thing, it's everything. The no deodorant, the toothpaste situation. What's wrong with not using toothpaste? I interrupted, genuinely baffled. Wait, what? Beth said, her voice almost a whisper. I don't use toothpaste, I explained. It's unnecessary. Water and a good scrub with the toothbrush are all you need. Toothpaste is a scam, and it's bad for the environment. Beth looked like she was about to have an aneurysm. You don't use toothpaste? She repeated, like she couldn't believe the words coming out of my mouth. Correct, I said, nodding. It's better for your teeth and the planet. Jenny lost it. She was laughing so hard she had to sit down, tears streaming down her face. Oh my God, she gasped. This is the best day of my life. Dan looked exhausted. This is why I didn't want to make a big deal out of it, he muttered. I was just trying to help. Well, you didn't, I snapped. If people have a problem with me, they can say it to my face instead of hiding behind passive-aggressive gifts. Beth shook her head, looking like she wanted to say something but didn't know where to start. Mike took another sip of his coffee and muttered, This is better than Netflix. I could feel my frustration boiling over. You know what? I said, grabbing the kit from the counter. I'm taking this to HR. This is harassment. Dan's eyes widened. Harassment, he repeated, looking genuinely alarmed. Are you serious? Dead serious, I said. You've embarrassed me in front of the entire office. This is completely unprofessional. Jenny stopped laughing long enough to say, Oh, this I've got to see. I stormed out of the break room, hygiene kit in hand, and made my way straight to HR. I could feel the weight of everyone's stares behind me. But I didn't care. I was going to make it clear that this kind of behavior, giving someone soap as a gift, was unacceptable in a professional environment. When I got to HR, I slapped the box down on the desk in front of Karen, the HR manager. I need to file a complaint, I said, my voice still shaking with indignation. Karen raised an eyebrow, clearly startled. All right, she said, pulling out a notepad. What seems to be the issue? I launched into the whole story, starting with Dan handing me the kit and ending with the passive-aggressive comment about self-care. I made sure to emphasize how humiliated I felt, especially with everyone else in the office laughing and treating it like a joke. Karen listened patiently, nodding at all the right moments. But as I kept talking, I noticed something odd. She was biting her lip, like she was trying not to smile. Finally, when I finished, she said, So, let me get this straight. Dan gave you a hygiene kit as a gift, and you believe this was meant to insult you? Yes, I said firmly. It was clearly meant to be a dig at my hygiene habits, which for the record are perfectly fine. Karen hesitated, glancing at the box on the desk. Okay, she said slowly. And just to clarify, what are your usual hygiene practices? I frowned, unsure why that was relevant. I shower when necessary, I said, maybe twice a month. I brush my teeth every day with water, no toothpaste. And I don't use deodorant because it's bad for your health and the environment. Karen blinked. For a long moment, she didn't say anything. Then, she cleared her throat and said, All right, I'll need to speak with Dan and gather more information before we move forward. Good, I said, crossing my arms. Because this kind of behavior can't be tolerated. I left her office feeling satisfied, but my confidence didn't last long. When I got back to my desk, the atmosphere was different. People were whispering and glancing at me like I'd grown a second head. Jenny had tears in her eyes, clearly still laughing from earlier. And even Mike, who's usually indifferent to office drama, gave me a pitying look. HR will sort this out, I muttered to myself, trying to focus on my work. About an hour later, Dan walked by my desk. He didn't say anything, but the look on his face said it all. Exhausted, annoyed, and maybe a little amused. I figured he'd just had his meeting with Karen, which meant HR was finally taking this seriously. But then, Karen called me back into her office. When I sat down, she didn't waste any time. I've spoken with Dan, she said, as well as a few other employees who were present during the incident. And I have to say this seems less like harassment and more like an awkward attempt to address a genuine concern. A genuine concern? I repeated, stunned. What concern? Karen sighed, folding her hands on the desk. It seems that multiple employees have expressed discomfort about your hygiene practices. Dan thought he was helping by giving you the kit. It may not have been the best approach, but his intentions weren't malicious. My jaw dropped. You're taking his side? I'm not taking sides, Karen said gently, but I think this might be a good opportunity for some self-reflection. Self-reflection? Was she serious? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. So, you're saying I'm the problem? I asked, my voice rising. I'm saying, Karen said carefully, that perhaps there's a disconnect between how you perceive yourself and how others perceive you. I felt like the walls were closing in. This wasn't just about Dan anymore. This was a full-blown conspiracy. I left Karen's office feeling blindsided. A disconnect? What was that supposed to mean? I went back to my desk, trying to piece everything together. Was this really about me? Or was it just office politics at play? Jenny strolled by, still giggling to herself. How'd it go with Karen? She asked, not even trying to hide her smirk. None of your business, I snapped. But she just shrugged and walked away. The rest of the day was tense. I noticed people keeping their distance. Not in an obvious way, but enough that I started feeling paranoid. Every whispered conversation, every sideways glance felt like it was about me. Even Dan didn't make eye contact when we passed in the hallway. That night, I vented to my roommate about the whole thing. He listened quietly, but when I finished, he just said, "Maybe they have a point." "What's that supposed to mean?" I asked, narrowing my eyes. He hesitated. "Look, man, I get where you're coming from. You don't like following the crowd, but maybe you're underestimating how other people experience you." "Other people?" I repeated. "Like who? You?" He held up his hands defensively. "I'm just saying, if multiple people are saying something, maybe it's worth considering." I didn't sleep well that night. My roommate's words, Karen's disconnect comment, and Dan's exhausted expression kept playing in my mind. Were they right? Was I the one out of touch? The next morning, I got to work early, determined to put the whole thing behind me. But as soon as I walked into the break room, I saw it. The hygiene kit, sitting on the counter with a post-it note that read, "Just in case." I felt my face flush with anger. This had to be Dan. Who else would do something like this? I grabbed the kit, marched straight to his desk, and slammed it down in front of him. "What is this?" I demanded. Dan looked up, startled. "I didn't put that there," he said, genuinely confused. "Then who did?" I shot back. He shook his head. "I have no idea." Before I could press him further, Jenny walked by and said, "Wow, that's still going around?" She looked at the kit and laughed. "You should probably just keep it at this point." "Do you think this is funny?" I snapped. Jenny stopped laughing, her expression softening. "No, I don't," she said. "But maybe it's time to ask yourself why it keeps happening." Her words stung. For the first time, I started to wonder if I was missing something. Later that day, I overheard Beth talking to Mike near the coffee machine. "I feel bad," she said quietly. "We probably shouldn't have let it go this far." "Yeah," Mike agreed. "But what were we supposed to do? Someone had to say something." I stepped into the break room, and they both froze. "What are you talking about?" I asked. Beth looked at Mike, who avoided my gaze. Finally, she said, "Look, no one wanted to hurt your feelings, but you've got to understand, this isn't about being eco-friendly or different. It's about basic hygiene. People were struggling to be around you." I stared at her, speechless. "It's not just the smell," she continued. "It's everything. The toothpaste thing, the no deodorant. It's been hard for people." Dan just had the guts to address it directly. I didn't know what to say. For the first time, I felt genuinely embarrassed. I left the break room in a daze. Beth's words echoed in my head. People were struggling to be around you. Was I really that bad? I'd always thought my choices were progressive, eco-conscious, even a little rebellious. But now, it felt like the whole office had been quietly tolerating me out of politeness. Or worse, pity. When I got home that night, I couldn't stop thinking about everything. The laughter, the comments, the way people avoided sitting too close. I'd brushed it off as coincidence or office politics, but maybe I'd been fooling myself. I decided to call my mom, someone who always tells it like it is. After I explained the situation, she paused for a long moment before saying, "Honey, I love you, but maybe it's time to rethink some of your habits. People aren't always going to be as nice as your family." Hearing it from her hit me harder than anything else. The next day, I brought the kit back into the office. I walked up to Dan's desk and placed it down gently. "Hey," I said, avoiding his eyes. "Sorry for overreacting. I think I might have needed this more than I realized." Dan looked up, surprised but not smug. "No hard feelings," he said. "If you ever want to talk about it, I'm here." That afternoon, I went out and bought deodorant, toothpaste, and even some fancy soap. It felt weird, like I was betraying my principles. But as I used them that night, something unexpected happened. I felt good, cleaner, fresher. Maybe the others had a point after all. The office vibe changed after that. People started sitting closer, chatting more, even laughing with me instead of at me. I'd like to say it was all because of my sparkling personality, but let's be real. It was the soap. So, Reddit AITA for refusing the gift at first? Or was this just one of those brutally awkward life lessons I needed to learn the hard way? Thank you for watching. Tell us what you would do in this situation.